Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and it's finally here. A mod that I've been waiting a long time for is finally released just yesterday, the Jade-Blooded Vampires. So if you're looking to have a Cathayan campaign but want something very different to Cathay, more so just playing as an undead faction, this is definitely going to be a mod that you might be interested in. The idea is that you're playing as undead Cathayans. There's a bit of a story there, there's a lot of inside player-made lore, which honestly is actually quite good, and it's going to be quite different. You see, you're starting, as you can see here, in Central Cathay, meaning that you're pretty much surrounded by enemies left, right, and center, very similar to the campaign of Deathmaster Snickage, using an army of dead boys and girls. So let's just jump right in with the faction effects. The Curse of Non-Chung, which is weapon strength plus 9% for Jiangxi units. This is the units that will be specific to you. Has a unique building chain in faction capital that provides various effects. Unique faction units have access to the harmony mechanics, so if you're used to playing Grand Cathay, you'll know that you want to use units of yin and yang together to be able to get the most out of your units, and then each unit belonging to this faction has the Taint of the Black Locus ability. And you can see the effect down there, which means that you'll be doing constant damage to your enemy. It won't be a lot at the very beginning, but you'll start doing more as you start racking up the effect, and the idea is that you want to bog down your enemies. We'll talk about the tactics when we get to the actual battle portion of this video. Your Lord's own unique trait is as follows: enemy casualty replenishment rate minus 15% for local region, which means that this one's going to be quite good if you're catching down enemies in their own territory. Don't give them a chance to replenish anything, you know? Then vampiric corruption plus 6 in local province, again very useful since you're playing an undead faction. And finally enemy leadership minus 4 for enemy armies and local province. All in all, I quite like this trait. You've also got access to a bunch of unique spells, as you can see, and these will be used by a bunch of different characters throughout your campaign. The idea is to have something kind of stylized, and I quite like it. I think it's a pretty cool lore of magic overall. Mostly focusing around augments, summons, and hexes, but it's actually really good. You're going to like this, especially when you start using it more, as you'll find it to be really common. The character's got her own unique skill line as expected because this is a legendary lord, including a mount that we'll see later on, and then loads of different things focusing around winds of magic changes, hell, even giving the enemies more chance to miscast, some more vampiric corruption, which is obviously very useful if you want to turn Cathay into a vampiric kingdom. There is a really powerful one in the form of extra control for your local province and then all adjacent provinces. So if you're moving out quite heavily and you're trying to expand quite quickly, you won't be suffering a lot of control issues. Since you're playing as a Cathayan undead faction, you'll have access to the compass mechanic, which is going to be quite useful as there's a lot of different bonuses that you can use, especially the growth one I feel is probably the most important, as you don't really get growth buildings. Well, you do, but very limited. So we'll talk about that a bit later when we get to the construction. But overall, this does make the mechanic a little bit more fun for you. Now, we need to talk about technology. Right now, the tree looks like the original. However, all the effects, well, most of the effects have been changed. And the idea is because you've got a full new roster, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So yeah, it's going to have a unique tree in the future. Keep in mind that this mod is in its beta form, but all the effects have been changed and everything's there to exactly what you need. I really like this. I think it's pretty cool. It makes sense just not to go full ham on a tech tree just for a design when you can just get everything else done and then go from there to improve the mod as time progresses. It's still kind of the same. So each section is very similar to the vanilla counterpart. So for example, the Lamian book is focused on a lot of economy stuff. So if you're used to playing vampire counts, you're going to be used to playing this. And I think that's probably the best thing possible, as that means that you'll just be familiar without being really familiar, because the effects are different. But already you can see that there's a bunch of different names, and this is because obviously you've got a full new roster, you've got loads of new units, you're not going to be playing like a traditional vampire count. In a similar sense you will, but not so much. It's a very weird thing. Let's talk about construction. It still kind of feels like a vampire count faction, but it's obviously changed a lot. You can see there's a lot of new units, and a lot of your vampire count roster is actually missing. I think you're only really keeping the bats, the direwolves, and the crypt ghouls, but everything else has been changed. There's loads of different effects for the buildings, and interestingly enough, the growth building is missing. This is something I mentioned before. There's a few things that you need to go through. I think that this makes it a little bit slower to expand in a sense, but I mean that about going into like the higher tiers, whereas you'll still be swarming a lot. Like these units are really good for swarms, so I'd say that you'd be taking Cathay at a very similar pace to what you would normally do if, say, you had Manfred here. It definitely leads to a different type of playstyle, and I kind of like this. Honestly, it's very different, and I feel like it just is a bit more unique, which kind of makes me want to play this more. I've been playing for a few hours at this point because last night I was just enjoying myself, and yeah, honestly, it's really, really fun. I find that growth is slower, but control is never an issue, so you're basically just expanding without too many issues. It is important to keep in mind that since you are a vampire army, like a lot of the enemy factions, a lot of the factions which will normally stay neutral, will look to you as a possible enemy, so you've got to take them out quick. I feel like expanding through Cathay quickly is probably the best way to go. Your new generic Lord option are the Jade-Blooded Master Warlocks, which look freaking cool. Like, that's a really big thing here. And, yeah, Spellcaster, able to do a decent amount of damage. They're not very heavily armored, but I'd say that they're decent enough in melee to be fine. But you want them more as a supporting role, and yeah, I think that works perfectly okay. It very much depends on how you decide to play. But yeah, the skills will focus on that. The spells will be the new stuff. The upper one will be focusing on melee. And the bottom two, you know, the blue and the red skill line will be focusing around, you know, basic administration, buffing up your troops. Same as the vampire counts once again. The only difference is obviously it's focusing around your new stuff, which, you know, makes sense. One of your new generic hero options are the channelers, and they're pretty cool. So they've got a mixture of spells from some new stuff to a little bit of Curse of Years, you know, so you use some of these spells. This is essentially replacing your Necromancer, essentially, and it's pretty cool. It's a great supporting character. It's nice to have something so different. Keep in mind that we don't know what's going to happen if we eventually get Jade-Blooded vampires in an undead faction, so this is going into some Chinese mythology and stuff, and I think it's represented kind of cool. Like, I might not be the most knowledgeable at this, but it's definitely really interesting to see so much level of detail. Like, the characters, you'll see them a little bit later, just look freaking awesome. You do have another generic hero option, and keep in mind, I'm going to be butchering a lot of these names, so I'm assuming this is a new GUI. I'm probably wrong. I am probably very, very wrong. But this is more of a melee-focused character, also assassin style, so this is something that you want up close. It's got ethereal, it's able to do decent damage, whilst also have a decent amount of physical resistance. Yeah, if you're used to, let's say, for example, the Banshee, this is essentially just that version of the Banshee, and it works out pretty well, as it gives you something to be able to just, like, you know, slap about. Plus, if you're trying to just assassinate characters and all that type of stuff, this is the one that you want to use. So before we move on to the actual battle portion, where we're going to be checking out all the units and the stats, I want to talk about the campaign. I really like this. It's something very different, which is expected from a modded faction, of course, but it still feels like a Warhammer faction, which I think is pretty cool. It's one of those things where modded factions end up bringing in a lot of life to the game, and having a undead faction which isn't a Vaughn Carstein I think is pretty cool, because we have way too many vampire count factions, but they're all Vaughn Carstein, barring Kemler, but Kemler kind of plays like a Vaughn Carstein. It's one of those odd things. In the future we'll probably get some distinction when the vampire counts eventually get a proper rework. Well, let's hope. But this definitely scratches that itch. It's so nice to start in Cathay too. Like, I know Ghost is close, but Ghost again plays like a Vaughn Carstein, where this is, you've got a lot of magical energy, you want to bog down the enemy and do a lot of damage for that, and it's not so much heavy spellcasting, which is obviously a bit different to normal vampires. It definitely feels different, and it definitely is very, very fun. The Legendary Lord herself looks absolutely amazing. She's not a vampire, she's a puppet, I believe that's how she's described. The character model is absolutely incredible, I just love the look. And the mount too is just freaking cool. But we're going to be focusing on her because you get the mount through other means too. I'm just a really big fan. I really love this. Like, obviously it's not custom voice acted because there's no facilities for that in Total War Warhammer yet, but it's kind of cool. The Jade-Blooded Master Warlocks look absolutely amazing too. Like, you're going to be hearing that a lot because some of these models are just absolutely awesome. And I think that that's a big thing here. But anyways, you can see Spellcaster, Harmony Yin, because the modifiers do come into place too, which I think is freaking awesome. It's a really weird way of playing vampire counts. Having the modifiers, having Yin and Yang, really change up your playstyle. I know I'm saying awesome a lot, but I'm actually really enjoying myself here. We're back here with our Banshee type of hero, and you can see that she looks freaking cool. Again, you know, Harmony Yin, she's ethereal, she's got armor piercing, she's a duelist, so she's great for taking out characters. Definitely your character sniper if you can actually just, you know, boost them up with skills and stuff, which, yeah, they'll kind of work quite well at a lower level, but I feel like they're a lot stronger after you start leveling them up a little bit and using them in battle a bit more. The Chandler, again, freaking awesome. It's also got barrier too, so it's a bit safer to keep around. You wouldn't be so worried about having it closer to the front line. Spellcaster support, Harmony Yin, Amplifier once again. It's just so cool. I love the models. I can't stop looking at these models because there's so much detail to them, and it just makes things so special. Obviously, you've got a Lore of Magic there, which we've already gone through earlier in the video. So, yeah, you want to have at least one in your army, that's for sure. Chanters are going to be some of your first units, and yeah, a lot of stats aren't going to be great. Don't you worry, because they can handle themselves. Unholy Incantations, which we'll go over a little bit here, and poor melee. So a lot of your damage is going to be for your other stuff. Your earlier units are going to be mostly top hits, but they're very good top hits at that. When it comes to Unholy Incantations, well, they've got regen, and they'll get better bonuses overall as they're just like they're, you know, fighting. They'll be affecting loads of allies too. Like, yeah, they're pretty good. They're pretty good. This is like a healer unit. And they're supported really well by the Returned, which are dual infantry. They're Harmony Young. They're anti-infantry. They can rampage those, to keep that in mind. But they're weak against armor. I love them. I absolutely love them. Yeah, it's using the stuff that we've already seen, you know, the animations from zombies and stuff. But the character models, the unit models themselves, just freaking gorgeous. Another unit is the Unearthed Laborers, which are a pickaxe infantry. I actually really like the weapon. So, Harmony Yin, special ranged weapon. It's not great. They're a meat shield unit though, so this is something that you just want. They're just taking the damage. The range is, what, 70? Very small ammunition, but the idea is this is a unit that's throwing rocks at the enemy as they're getting closer, which, yeah, kind of fits. I kind of like it. The hats are cool too. Hats are always awesome. It's a Warhammer thing. Another version of the Chanters is the Occult Lanterns, and this will also give them a little bit of a summon too. I really like this because it shows that your faction is mostly focused around summoning and swarming rather than a lot of magic. The summons wouldn't really count as magic here. This is more focused about bringing in a untold mass of hordes in a sense, right? Returned Spearmen are also another unit. Nothing too special about them compared to the other Returns, barring the fact that they're also anti-large, and it gives you some anti-large. Let's be very honest here. You need these, especially if you're dealing with Cathay, and if you're going to be dealing with demons, you're going to be dealing with, well, you know, the big angry crocodile, which is very likely to declare war on you within 30 turns, depending how Lokia deals with him. So it's always good to be prepared. But here's where you start getting the better units, like the Revenants. These are basically your Cathay and Graveguard. So Harmony Young, Armored and Shielded, pretty good stats. Essentially just like a Graveguard. So yeah, it's going to bring in a nice proper front line that is fairly durable. There's two versions of the Graveguard here. The second version has the halberds with anti-large, so it's going to be very useful for you. The units look freaking cool too. I love the muted colors. This is something that I really hope we get in the future officially, like just units like this, because they just look freaking awesome. Next we have the Jiangshi, which is a Jade-Blooded vampire unit, so Harmony Yin, Armor Piercing, Cursed Touch, and Rigor Mortis. This means that they're very, very slow. I like them. I really like them. They are fairly different. I kind of say that this is like a, I don't know what to call this unit really. It's a very different type of unit that I've never really used before. But they definitely perform well in battle. I think that they work out quite well, especially when you start using them to just bog down the enemy a little bit. The fact is the Cursed Touch reduces their melee defense, their vigor, and hell, even their leadership. So this is a great unit that just puts a proper debuff on the enemy. Now you do have some cavalry, not a lot, and these are once again Revenants. You've got two, you've got the standard one, and then you've got the one with glaives. So kind of like Black Knights, I think a little bit better. Thing is, you've got the standard one, which is the great weapon. They're both kind of anti-infantry, but one is obviously better at dealing damage to large, but they've both got some armor piercing, damage dealer. They're just freaking awesome. The speed is pretty good too. 72 is actually fairly decent. Armor is good, leadership is good, stats are just really good for this unit. So yeah. Spirit Host is an interesting type of horde unit. So Harmony Young, Cursed Touch too, so they can put some debuffs on, and they're ethereal. They can hold down enemies quite well. It really depends on how you use them. I've kind of been using them as a flanker, but then I've also been using them up close. They're multi-purpose, yeah. They're kind of multi-purpose for a foot troop, and I really like them. I really like them. The great thing here is that you have a lot of variety. A lot of the stuff seems weak, but it's actually not that weak. Anyways, let's move on to the Starved Marquee, which are some of the most grim models I've seen, obviously using the base of something that we already know, but, you know, very similar too. You know, they're anti-infantry, they're ethereal though. They can take damage if they're not in combat, so you want them in combat. But just look at the model, man. Look at the freaking model. It's just so awesome. Sometimes a simple kit bash can just make things so special. And this is a really big thing with Warhammer. Tabletop and everything, you know? You'll notice that a lot throughout this roster. Hell, you can see this with the Mogwai, which it's really just mostly replacing the head, but it makes it look so grim. I think it's the whole lipless mouth and those bulging eyes. It really gives you that feeling of... makes you uneasy, doesn't it? Anyway, so yeah, they're pretty good overall. Flaming attacks, these are going to be useful. They've got a lot of damage to them. They've got a lot of damage to them. I love the big units. I love using these. They've got poor leadership, so they're going to be used exactly the same way as trolls. Use them more of a shock unit, but they're good at what they do. Next is the Pale Lady. So if you've ever been clubbing in Manchester when the lights turn on after the clubs close down, yeah, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, big single entity unit, ethereal stalk. This is a leadership killer, I'd say. Like, you can use it for everything, and it's pretty good at just taking out characters too, I'd say. But it's good for attacking unknown. If you can hide a little bit and catch the enemy unawares, they'll be the most effective. And yeah, I think that the unit itself is pretty cool. It's very grim. It's very freaking grim. I think the hair just makes it a little bit odd, you know, but like odd in a good way. We'll start moving on to the next big single entity, and that would be the Yogwai. This is anti-large, you know, it's got Dark Realm manifestations, it's got Terror, it's another Yin unit, it's very fast, 80 speed is really freaking good. This is your big boy. This is the one that does the most damage, and you'll notice it being absolutely tremendously good when you're using it against big single entities. I think that it's a good monster killer. Like, it's freaking cool. I love the look. I absolutely love the look. And that sentiment carries on to the Underworld Gate Guardian, which is another big thing. It's basically using giant stats just without the armor improvements because it's ethereal. And yeah, I mean, look at it. It's just awesome. It's a giant, so there's not really much to talk about here. But look at it. It's just freaking cool. And finally, we have the Cursed Jade Carriage, which is, well, it's kind of hard to describe because it's very good at melee. It's very good at certain things like, you know, being able to skirmish. It's pretty good at just being in general multi-purpose because it's also, as you can see from its stats, it's kind of like an artillery piece too. It's incredible because you actually have something that provides a lot of different support, and sometimes you want to be able to shoot your enemy from afar. 150 range isn't that much, but it still adds in something there for you. And it's just, it looks cool. Like, that's the thing. When you start looking at these things, especially with mods, you want a little bit of multi-purpose, but not being able to cover every single thing. And I think that this is done extremely well. Like, what you can see on the screen now is a randomly generated army on my part and a randomly generated Cathayan army, which is them more focusing on melee. And you'll start to see how things are. You'll start to notice that you need to keep your harmony up. Your units will perform a lot better. You're basically playing a Cathayan army just without the range and without the heavy artillery, and also without a lot of magic. You'll be focusing more on summoning. You'll be focusing more on fear. You'll be focusing on overwhelming your enemy. I say that this faction is a perfect mix of vampire counts and Grand Cathay, and I'm having so much fun with this. This has been really, really interesting. I'm loving these custom faction mods that are coming out. Some of them that are still in the works that you've been seeing, being posted on Reddit and stuff. It's showing creativity. It's showing a level of kit bashness that you'd see on the tabletop in Total War. Again, something that we're kind of used to with like OVN Lost Factions, but separated, you know? And we're getting so many talented modders bringing in so many cool things. I mean, it's kind of expected from this modder because this modder is, you know, Paul Janan, which is just very, very talented. But it's so great to see this. I've been having an absolute blast. This mod is just so freaking fun. You go on the mod page, which by the way is linked in the description below. There's more to come. Like, the modder wants to bring in some other things, change some stuff around. But even in its beta state, it's in a really, really good place. It's definitely something that you want to play if you like vampire counts, if you like undead factions, but you already kind of burnt out on Tomb King's Vampire Ghost and Vampire Counts, you want something different. Yeah, this is definitely something that you're going to want to play. Anyways, all that being said, again, it'll be found in the description below if you want to play it. It's absolutely fantastic, so I would recommend it. You'll need the unlocker too. It says that you need Mixer's Lords and the assets, but you don't actually need it because I've been playing without it. And it's perfectly fine. I'll let the rest of the battle play out if you want to see how it goes. I was just kind of like lazing about, just seeing how stuff would work. And let me know what you guys think about this mod in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. Until then, I shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.
Serve me, Master Necromancer.
Enemy incoming! Stand back!
Master Necromancer. Yes!
All is lost! Like the Emperor! Over them! This way, the Emperor!
I will. Master Necromancer.